All right, starting for real. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this session of the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series. The K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series is designed to help K-12 educators reimagine education with Blackboard teaching and learning solutions. The K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series harnesses the power of our K-12 community of academic leaders, teachers, and other experts to provide relevant, real-time, on-demand, and ongoing professional development opportunities for K-12 educators. My name is Katie Gallagher, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager leading Blackboard's Teaching and Learning Solutions and Product Marketing. I'll be serving as the moderator for the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series together with Colleen Smith from our Central Marketing team, who will also be helping answer questions in today's chat. We'll be joining you for the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series this fall. We're always open to new ideas for topics for the series, and we're in final stages of planning the spring series. So please let us know if you're interested in presenting a future session or you have a topic that you'd like to see. Let us know at katie.gallagher@blackboard.com. Each webinar in the series is recorded. You can search for the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series playlist on the Blackboard TV YouTube channel or go to tinyurl.com/bitsk12. You'll receive the recording from this session and the presentation slides in a few days after each webinar by email. In addition, you'll receive an invitation to participate in a professional learning community online designed to augment this series and create an avenue for ongoing collaboration and dialogue. So please accept the invitation and participate in the online PLC. As you can see, even beyond December, we have many exciting professional development sessions lined up. Please join us on Monday for Rubrics Really Relate with Larry Fallon from Arlington Public Schools. Go to bb.blackboard.com/K12bits to register for any or all sessions within the series. And be sure to download the new BB K-12 Live app for more PD on demand, including the entire recorded series and sessions from BB World this summer. Today, we're quite pleased to have Don Lorsey from North Carolina Virtual Public Schools take us through Shattering the Myths of Online and Blended Learning. This presentation will explore the myriad of myths surrounding online and blended learning and will shatter the long-established yet incorrect myths that seem to orbit online and blended learning. Despite the infancy of online and blended learning, there's a need for high-quality online and blended learning. There's a need for high-quality online and blended learning educators and leaders. Sorry about that. Participants will engage in conversation around those myths, so get ready, and the implication each holds for learning, and will discover and share promising online and blended practices to help and support the teacher and leader in navigating both online and blended environments. Don Lorsey is the Director of Professional Learning for North Carolina Virtual Public School. He served as an educator for 22 years before coming to NCVPS in 2007. He served as an English teacher for 11 years and instructional facilitator for 4 years. He's passionate about teaching, learning, innovation, leadership, and digital literacy. He currently lives in Statesville, North Carolina with his wife, Michelle, who's the Chief Academic Officer for NCVPS, and his daughter, Elizabeth, and 2 cats, Gator and Tebow. Yep, you guessed it, he's a Florida Gator fan. All right, so thanks everyone for joining us today. Just a couple items before I hand it over to Don. Be sure to use your chat or your Q&A, whatever you're more comfortable with. We want to keep this as interactive as possible, and I know Don's going to be posing some questions to you. So look for that chat button, look for the QA button. If you do use chat, please try to send it to all participants so that everyone can see. In the QA box, everyone can see for sure, so whether it's a question or not, feel free to use the Q&A box. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Don. Thanks so much for presenting today. Excited for your session.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie, for that fine introduction. And I don't know if I need to be too proud nowadays being a Florida Gator fan. But it's always good to, I love these opportunities that we can come together and talk about teaching, about learning, about how to innovate and how to grow professionally. And so, as Katie did say, this will be as interactive as possible in this synchronous environment through WebEx. And so There will be moments where you are asked to chat in the Q&A feature. You will also be sent out to two separate links, actually 3 separate links. One will be the driving slide deck that I'll use, and then the other one will be some tools that I'd like to use to kind of get some immediate feedback, discussion, and those kinds of things. So I do have to up front give apologies to any of my PowerPoint colleagues out there who love the slide deck of shuffling back and forth through PowerPoint. I decided today not to use PowerPoint. Instead, I'm going to actually share my desktop. But I'm also going to give you a link to the SMORE that I will be using today. And so hopefully you can see my desktop. And I'm going to actually put this link in the chat for you, and this is going out to all participants. This will be for you to have this, when we leave here today, you'll have access to this particular presentation on shattering the myths of online and blended learning. And I will have to say that this is a sneak peek because there are so many, and we'll talk about them in a few minutes, but there are so many myths that surround online and blended learning, and because of our time today, I wanted to choose the 2 salient myths I think that are pervasive and I think probably do more damage to the reputation of online and blended learning, and so we'll kind of cover through those. So I hope you're ready. I hope you got your seatbelt on, and I'm excited to be able to talk to you today. Feel free to ask any question throughout the presentation. Myself, Colleen, and Katie will be monitoring the chat there in the Q&A, and also the chat box feature. So when we think about shattering myths, I want you to think about, myths always have, when you think about myths in education or myths in online and blended learning specifically, you think about the ones that you've heard, the ones that you have said, and even the ones that you believe. And I'm hoping that at least through this presentation you're going to get just a modicum of understanding about, I think, what are the 2 primary myths that need to be shattered and busted as we talk about educating kids, but also educating adult learners as well. And so as I move forward, I wanted to highlight, at least in a visual, probably 9 of the most targeted myths that you find out in the online blended world, from online courses are not rigorous to they're all created equal to online teachers, and you could probably put a slash there for to say students, that because the online environment that you see there in the middle, because the online environment is online and blended, oftentimes students feel isolated, teachers feel isolated. One of the key myths that I think is pervasive throughout the world of online blended learning, and I think this is the one that North Carolina Virtual Public School really does an incredible job of shattering. And I hope that you had a chance last week, if you were a part of the Blackboard's teaching series last week. 2 of my colleagues talked about that co-teaching relationship and the importance of that and how that helps to further the learning of students with disabilities. But today, I didn't choose that specific myth. We're going to focus on 2. In fact, we're going to focus on the first one and the last one that you see listed there. Online courses are not rigorous as a myth, and then meaningful student relationships cannot be formed online. And I have to say I chose those 2 selfishly because those 2 are my favorite to talk about, and my favorite that I love to have conversations with educators about, because we can obviously through not only research but also practice how online blended learning courses and learning that is rigorous, but also that meaningful student-teacher relationships can be formed despite the modality in which they're learning. So here's our first discussion topic, and I'd like for you to put your responses in the chat. I know there's not a great deal of us today, which is great. So I'm hoping that that we'll be able to maybe have a little bit richer, a little bit more specific conversation relating this. But when you think about myths, around online and blended learning, please post in the chat. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there are myths surrounding online blended learning? You don't find myths necessarily in education in general, but specifically surrounding online blended learning. Why do you think those myths exist? If you can put some comments to the chat, and make sure that it all says it says send to all participants. That would be fantastic. Yep, you can see some that are already coming in the chat, lack of understanding. You know, I love that what Sharice said too about the idea of seat time. You know, if a warm body is not present in a seat, then you have that sense of myths that can be generated from that. Prior experiences maybe led them that way. Absolutely. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the term nexter or nexting, and I think a lot of times in online blended learning, you have, whether it be a program from a specific vendor or you have a program that is offered through a specific virtual school, much like NCVPS or other virtual schools, where you have kids who sit in front of a computer and they just spend all their time looking at text and reading text and clicking next and moving on to the next item. A lot of times experience, whether it be collegiately or secondarily, we see that sense of myths. That might be something Colleen might be able to help you with, Sue, if that's okay. Yeah, absolutely. Lack of experience, lack of exposure, lack of participation, or maybe a bad experience. So when we think about this myth, the first myth, when we talk about online courses are not rigorous, I want us to generate some discussion around this, and I wanted to use some. I wanted to use Answer Garden as a specific tool to collect feedback and to collect information. So if you have on your, if you've pulled up this s'more, you can actually right-click on the s'more and then open into a new window. But I'm also going to put the link for you in the chat. But I'd love for you to use this tool to answer this question: what defines rigor? So I put the Answer Garden link directly into the chat. So think about the rigor. Think about it in terms also is the rigor that we define, is it the same across no matter what learning environment you're in? Is there certain nuances or tenets of an online environment that's very different than a face-to-face that kind of promotes rigor? What do you think what are your thoughts as it relates to defining rigor and what that means to you? And you can, when you pull up the Answer Garden, I'm hoping this works. You know, this is one of those things where you cross your fingers that you hope the technology works when you need it to. So if you could type in there, you only get 20 characters to type. So so this will help with conciseness as well. So what defines rigor? I'm waiting for the responses to populate, and I'm gonna add one myself. There we go. Excellent. You can see how some of that, some folks have already fosters engagement, critical thinking, thinking something that is hard or complex. Absolutely. And I think one other piece too that defines this is problem solving, or the ability to find a particular solution to a particular problem. Transferable skills you see there, higher order thinking. Absolutely. And one of the things I think when you think about definitions of rigor, and you think about, and I'm going to move back to this more in just a few seconds, but when you think about rigor itself, and I'm speaking from the example of the work that we're doing at North Carolina Virtual Public School. Rigor is defined, especially when you think of the content and the courses that we develop for our 50,000 plus students. It's about answering these 5 critical learning questions. What do students need to learn? How will they learn it? How will you know if they learned it? What will you do if they don't learn it? And then what will you do if they already know it? And to us, when we think about curriculum design, when we think about curriculum implementation, when we think about engagement and creating relevance to students and connections with students, it's not about taking each of those 5 questions and then and treating them in a siloed fashion to make sure that we've got each of those questions answered. But I think if we look at from the standpoint of what we want students to know and be able to do, rigor helps, or these questions help to shape the complexities of the learning experience. And the questions themselves, to give credit, these are not questions that we developed, of course, but these are questions that are based upon the work of Rick and Rebecca DeFore and Robert Akers' work on professional learning communities. So when we think about in an online environment, you have these 5 critical questions. So how do you apply that learning? How do you apply to ensure that rigor's taking place? And a lot of the same ideas that we're talking about here are transferable to any learning environment. Learning is learning. Good teaching is good teaching. And so at NCVPS, we design our courses and develop our courses based upon the application of these 4 design and curriculum principles: universal design for learning, revised Bloom's, differentiation, and the implementation of instructional pillars. Now, because of time, I want to zero in, if I could, in a laser-like focus. I'd like to focus on the first one and the last one. When we talk about, okay, those 5 questions, well, what do we want students to learn? How will we know that they're learning it? What will we do if they learn it? All of these questions are applied to these specific, especially for these 4 areas. But when you think about universal design for learning, and in this more, I've given you some links and some additional exploration and some things that you can take away with in terms of looking at some of the specific models and some of the exemplars that are out there as it relates to UDL. And when you think about UDL, you have these 3 areas, representation, action and expression, and engagement. And I love it in CVPS. We've kind of boiled it down to the idea of see it, hear it, read it, do it. In every single lesson, in every single objective and outcome that we anticipate for the students, it is wrapped up into that sense of see it, hear it, read it, do it. You can see, I'm not going to read every single point here for you, but when we think about that idea of multiple means of representation, multiple means of expression here, providing options for kids, choice, models, exemplars, feedback, and then, of course, how do we engage our students? And I think bottom line, when we think about online learning and blended learning, and the reason why this myth ought to be busted and the reason why we at NCVPS shatter this myth is engaging students. We firmly believe that engagement is not just something that happens when you see a student face-to-face. Engagement is about how we motivate the student to learn, how we provide choice, how we tap into not only their interest socially, but also their interest intellectually or even linguistically. We think about that idea of providing numerous opportunities for students to self-assess, to reflect, whether it be through the announcements that their teachers post every day, to the specific feedback that they're given, and then the way that students are able to provide feedback and reflective pieces, not only in their own work, but also as they work collaboratively to build that sense of community. Now, this next item is to kind of show you in a snapshot, but also to provide you with a couple of links and a couple of key resources that I think will help you when you think about that question, how will students learn it? image that I've given you here is from one of our biology courses, one of our online biology courses. That not only do we teach with our traditional online program, but we also use the same UDL principles in our occupational course of study program, which is where we work in a co-teaching relationship with a face-to-face teacher and then one of our virtual teachers with our students with disabilities. So when we think about representing, when we think about expressing, when we think about engagement, this is a great visual to show that, you know, students may learn by demonstrating. They may learn by interacting with labs. They may find that rigor in the ways that they express their learning, whether creating their own vocies, whether it be directing students to communicate through texting, whether it be using a flipped environment to where students are looking at specific video options and video instructional delivery through videos and where a teacher may teach that concept. For instance, if you would, just take just a few moments if you can. I gave you to see this in practice, to see this sense of multiple means of representation, to see it, to hear it, to read it, to do it. I wanted to give you a link here, this short video of a biology teacher teaching a concept through sign language to our occupational course of study students. And if you want, you can right-click and open that up in a new link, or you can, and now I will try to get the link and put it in the chat for you. But take about, I think it's about 45 seconds maybe to watch our teacher teach these students. So hopefully you have been able to watch that video. If you can't, you can certainly go back at another time and explore this example of Ms. Fetzer, our teacher here, teaching students using this video as an example of UDL principles. The other piece, I just wanted to give you a visual here of when you think about universal design for learning and how UDL helps to accentuate the rigor of online and blended courses to provide pathways, multiple pathways for students to learn. A lot of these other key features here, whether it be from understanding and recognizing learning styles or multiple intelligences, brain-based research, Bloom's taxonomy, you know, all of those pieces are all of these pieces are incredibly important for learning and not to be treated in a siloed environment where you just focus on one of these particular, but you try to in an online blended environment to incorporate 21st century literacies, whether it be critical thinking or global themes or what have you. I found this, in fact, this was one of these last minute changes that I found today. I thought this was a great article, and you can look at this at your own leisure. But when we think about UDL, the work of Barbara Bray and Kathleen McClaskey relating to personalized learning is a very powerful. If you've never visited their site, I highly encourage you to do so. But I saw this through actually one of their Google Plus communities, and when I saw it, I thought, what a great, very easy, very simple way to express a complex idea. And when we talk about representing, when we talk about action and expression and then engagement, they trademarked three phrases, if you would: access, engage, and express. And so I kind of wanted to put in a visual of what it means for students to have equitable access to learning, equitable access to one another, equitable access to their teacher. How do learners engage in an online environment? Is it different than what we see in a face-to-face environment? How do they express? You know, is it just a simple post to a forum, or they're integrating of multiple Web 2.0 tools, digital tools, and so forth? And so I kind of wanted to unpack that a little bit as we kind of worked through this myth again that online courses are not rigorous. And so when we think about the rigor matrix, when we think about how do we engage students, you can see several on the outward piece of this visual. You see engagement, building community and collaboration, ways to promote understanding, meeting various needs, and so forth. And on the inside of this diagram, you see the ways in which that is accomplished. And I've provided some details underneath this to show you the specific applications of, you know, how do we use in an online blended environment? What is available? What technologies are available? What interactive learning aids? What learning resources? Does the pedagogy change? I think that's a viable question to really think about when we think about the rigor that's associated with online courses. I think when we talk about those 5 questions again, you know, what will they learn, but how will they learn it? I think pedagogy comes into a critical play in terms of how teachers teach. And we talked about good teaching is good teaching, and you're going to find that pedagogically. Do they have a sweet blend of pedagogy, content, knowledge, but also technology? And so I wanted to give you some of these. Here are some applications of online courses that can be that are made rigorous. When we talk about interactive learning aids, I've given you some examples here, videos and voice presentations. One of these is not free. Now, I'm all about free. I love free. I think you know, you search for the free before you go to the expense. And so Camtasia is not a free tool, but it's an exceptional tool. So if you have some resource money or some monies to invest in that, Camtasia is a great way to be able to develop, especially if you're flipping learning. Jing, which is their TechSmith's free version of screencast program. You got Screencast-O-Matic. Now, learning objects. I've given you some examples below there in the 3rd bullet, and these are some learning objects that we that we have incorporated in our courses to be able to provide learning for our students, engagement for our students, multiple means of representation for our students. And so I wanted to share these with you, and so I'm going to pause for just a couple seconds for you to look at. I've given you a history, a science, and a math example. Choose one of those to see. All of them are exceptional, and this isn't the only way, but this is a way that our teachers transform learning, and this is the way that our teachers engage, that rather than students just reading text on a page, very Web 1.0-ish, if you would, they engage the student learners, and they create some Web 2.0 kinds of thinking and Web 2.0's kinds of transformational learning. So let me pause for just a couple seconds and then give you an opportunity to take a look at either of those 3 learning object examples. And you can see, and no matter which of these 3 learning objects that you have chosen to kind of play with or explore, they both kind of represent the same learning object template. You have the buttons on the left and then the actual content in the middle or on the right-hand side. And you have, whether it be math or biology, you have, or the history, you have the teacher explaining the concept verbally so that they hear it, they're seeing it, they're reading it, and then ultimately there would always be a process activity or an input activity to where they have to either reflect on that learning or create an exit ticket or provide some kind of way to demonstrate their learning. So you see the UDL principles all wrapped up into this one learning, under these learning objects. Also, when we think about rigor and we think about how do we create rigor in our courses, our online blended courses, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the technologies that help frame that. In all 3 of which of these are Blackboard products. Of course, you've got the Blackboard LMS, Course Sites, which is a free learning management system, and then Blackboard Collaborate. Either of those 3 sources are great ways to allow the learning to take place. But the other piece that I know that is kind of an interface that you can. Now I've done this with Course Sites, so Katie or Colleen, you may correct me if I'm wrong. But I know SoftTalk can be interfaced with Course Sites, I know, but I'm thinking also with Blackboard as well. And so SoftTalk is another learning management, if you would, but I chose this one too because I know that in some of the design and development I've done for professional learning in Blackboard, we've used SoftTalk to help accentuate and add to the many great features that Blackboard offers in their LMS. And then, of course, rigor, we can't talk about rigor without talking about the 4 C's, and that's, communication, collaboration, connection, and critical thinking. And I'm going to show you in a few minutes in the next section how we take those 4 C's and how we make that and make it applicable to and real for not only the student learning but the teacher learning as well. And then finally, when we think about rigor, when we think about creating rigor, we can't not have a conversation about blooms. I've given you a link here to some great resources on taking each of the levels of blooms. In fact, I'm going to click on this for you just to kind of show this to you. So this is a great resource and the reason why I showed it because it takes the specific level of bloom, but when it talks about the specific possible activities, it doesn't just focus on the brick and mortar kind of activities. It focuses on digital learning, digital processing, mind mapping, Web 2.0 tools, search engines, Google, those kinds of things. So it actually takes a look at from the standpoint of digital resources rather than the kind of paper and pen that we would oftentimes find in a brick and mortar environment. So let me go back to my small. So rigor. The last piece, as we think about shattering this myth, I don't think I know that this myth is shattered when you create instructional pillars and that's a mountain that you're willing to die on. So these are the non-negotiables when we think about the instructional pillars of learning. And I think those instructional pillars are very different in a face-to-face environment. Although when you look at the 4 that I've identified here, you're going to find a lot of similarities with if you ever taught in a face-to-face or if you're teaching in a face-to-face now. You'll find a lot of similarities here, but these 4 specifically, I think, are modeled and tailored for teachers who are teaching in an online blended environment. So when we go back to our 5 questions, right? How will we know students are learning? What will we do if they don't know it? And then what will we do if they already know it? And so I wanted to kind of give you a sneak peek or snapshot, if you would, of the our 4 instructional pillars at North Carolina Virtual Public School. Now, we use, and I hope it's safe to say this in a Blackboard piece, we have 2 learning management systems. We have Blackboard and we have Moodle. I'll say Moodle real quietly. But we have our teachers teach through announcements. With those teachers that are teaching in Blackboard, they teach through announcements. I chose Learning Block because that is the language that we use in our other LMS instance. But our teachers teach through announcements, and I'll give you some additional explanation of that in a few minutes.
Hey, John. John,
yes.
Not to interrupt, you made me laugh, but just FYI, you guys actually run Moodle through us through Moodle Rooms. So no offense taken either way, but
all right, excellent. So, and see, that's my shop. So I don't hear when they start talking all the techie language. That's when I'm like the Charlie Brown teacher. So anyway, I appreciate you saying that. All right. So when we think about the 4 pillars themselves, it's all focused upon teaching and learning. So teaching through announcements and/or the learning block, teaching through effective feedback, teaching through synchronous conversations to build relationships, and that's going to come into play when we talk about this last myth before we close up shop today, and then teaching through individualized learning. So when we think about the 4 pillars, those are the 4 pillars that shape our that shape our learning and shape our students' learning, and that help create rigor in our online blended program. So I want to do this last bit of conversation and communication before we move up, and we're going to start wrapping up here in the next 10-15 minutes. So we have time for questions. But when you think about your foundational pillars, those are our 4. And those 4 may be translatable to every situation, whether it be adult learning to, because these myths are just as applicable to the adults as they are to the students. Whatever these foundational pillars are, I've provided 2 links here, one to a poll everywhere, the other to the specific review responses. And so I would like for you to respond to, and I'm going to put this in the chat as well, so I'm going to put this here. I'd love for you to respond what you see are the foundational pillars essential for creating rigor in an online blended learning environment. So that's where you submit your response, and then I'm going to pull up the actual response hub where we're going to collect our responses today. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed here that this works. Yeah, so we see here the first item here, engage students with a variety of pathways. They're coming in now, absolutely. Formative assessment interaction, problem-based learning, individualized learning, great. Discussions focused on deeper learning, absolutely. And so no matter what the specific, whatever we call it, whatever pillar you call it, these are the foundational pieces that that you'll help to defend and help create an environment that is beyond the nexting, that is beyond the Web 1.0 kind of learning environment. And when we think about these 4 pillars as they look here, before we move on to the second myth, a lot of great things here as we think about, okay, teaching through announcements. We feel to create rigor that the announcements and the instructional pieces there need to be inform, celebrate, instruct, providing feedback, specific, directive, timely, connective, has the right tone. In terms of creating asynchronous conversations, they need to be frequent and consistent, but they also have to have trust and respect in order to build that relationship. And then, of course, the final pillar in terms of needing individualization, looking at the needs, focusing on personalized, individualized learning, and then helping students to create opportunity to where they have ownership. And all of that helps to ensure that not only do online blended learning courses have rigor, but also relevance and meaning for students. And I've given you some additional exploration pieces on our 4 pillars if you're interested there as well. Now, this last myth is probably my favorite of all of the 9 that I featured up below, and I'm going to talk to you about how, if you want to learn more, we do have an option for you to learn more if you want to take a group of teachers through, if you want to provide some work that perhaps maybe you do with a cohort of teachers. That we have an option that I'll share with you here in just a few minutes. But one of the most powerful instances of online and blended learning is the power to connect and the power to form relationships. I love this statement by Dr. James Comer: no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. And then here's a quote from Cindy Rigsby: students can't learn where they don't feel valued. One of the main pillars and one of the tenets of NCVPS is this tenet on building relationships, the power of connecting. We find with our students will come back and tell us that they've had more meaningful contact, more meaningful connection with their online teacher than they ever do with their face-to-face. And to me, I think that's tragic in a sense, because I think both environments, I think it's important that whether it's face-to-face or online, it is critical to have that kind of connection and relationship that you build with your students. And so I provided here with you some research that points to this issue about effective, where it talks about content. We hear content is king. We think content is very important, but content alone does not lead to effective learning, and that's where we feel that relationships are so critical and so key. And so I'm going to skip down to the next item here because I want to conclude with this. When we think about the why. Why is this important? The research here in these particular elements here speak for itself. I would like to focus, if I could, on this middle research element. It says great teachers form strong relationships with their students and show that they care about them as people. Great teachers are warm, accessible, enthusiastic, and caring. Teachers with these qualities are known to stay after school and make themselves available to students and parents who need them. They are involved. And so when we think about, okay, well, how does that translate to an online environment? Teachers that teach in an online environment have just as much propensity to be warm and accessible and enthusiastic and caring as a teacher that teaches in a brick-and-mortar school. In fact, I think that kind of relationship with a student is even more so, because there is so much myth around online blended learning that learning is cold, that learning is disconnected, that students are in a silo where they have no interaction and no feelings of value associated with that. And so we've got the why, but I want to share with you also the last 2 things here before I wrap up, because I know I want to leave some time for some questions or some last-minute comments. But when we think about building relationships with students, this is a way that you can shatter that myth. Students always are first, and I think we find that, this is not, online blended learning doesn't hold the market on that. This is learning in general. This is education in general. But students first, teachers matter, and I think it's important, and that's one of our core tenets of NCVPS, is that we believe in the power of the teacher. We believe that a teacher cannot be replaced. Now, do we also hold value? Do we see value in the educational instances of, say, MOOCs, massively open online courses? Absolutely. But when we talk about meaningful learning for students, we feel that connection is so important, and that connection can look very different across the environments. Communication happens. That's another non-negotiable, to build that communication. You know, if you turn a kid loose or turn a student loose in an online environment, they have to have that support in place. We firmly believe at NCVPS that all kids can learn online. It's not just for the high flyers. It's not just for the AP kids. And our occupational course of study program shows that and proves that learning can happen, provided there's the right support in place. And that's where this idea of building relationships come in. So how do we do it? So I've given you, obviously, for the scope of our time today, I can't go through each of these pieces. But I've given you about 8 bulleted points about, okay, well, how do you build meaningful relationships in an online environment? How do you connect? And you know, and I think this is just as applicable to the post-secondary level as well, to the way that professors and adjunct professors and so forth relate to their students. I think this is translatable. No matter what age, what level you are, having that relationship is essential. So I've given you several practices, some ideas, some specific North Carolina virtual ways that we create some expectations for our teachers, the expectations for meeting the first week. I've given you a great article there on 5 ways to build positive and lasting relationships with students. And then the last one too, I think one of the key ingredients is building and sustaining community. And I've given you some, I think, 7 examples here of a real-life online teacher who's making this happen. And so if you wanted to, you can open that up in I think I just opened that up. Here it comes. Open that up in a different link, and you can see I've given you these are practical teachers who are engaging with their class by being present with their class, being present in their class by creating videos, jumping into the discussion boards. You know, I think sometimes forums and discussion boards can be so cold and overly used that oftentimes if a teacher jumps into and carries that conversation maybe outside of in another synchronous environment like a Google Hangout, like Blackboard Collaborate, whatever, I think that can help as well. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you have access to these to look at some of the great examples of how one teacher is making those connections in the first week of her class, how she's creating a conversation tone. I gave this example here of a chemistry teacher who is connecting with her students, very powerful stuff on how she's building relationships. It's not just here's your content, read it, click your button, submit your assignments, and let me provide the obligatory great job feedback. It's personalizing, it's connecting, and it's individualizing as well. So just to give you some examples there. Now, we do have these 2 myths are part of a cadre, if you would, of 9 myths that we explore in a professional learning experience that we offer. And you have some information down at the bottom of this SMORE too, if you want to plug in and participate and connect with other educators on shattering the myths of online and blended learning. The course itself that we have created and developed is great for individualized learning. It's great for team learning, PLC kind of learning, and the details are there below. But that's you know, in the 50 minutes I have, I want to leave time for questions. But anyway, that's the exploration into 2 of those 9 myths that I think are essential, and the reality of shattering those myths are presented here in these two, that online courses are rigorous and online courses do allow for building meaningful and lasting relationships with teachers and students. So that's it. That's all I have. So I'm going to turn it back over for questions, and then I'm going to turn back the mic over to Katie and Colleen for any questions that we may have.
Great. Can you hear me, Don?
Yes.
Okay, great. This has been fabulous. I know we've had tons of great engagement throughout, but before we move to closing slides, I want to reiterate Don's questions. What additional questions, comments, feedback does the group have? And thank Don for just a really great, engaging presentation.
Hey, thank you so much.
Okay, there was a question earlier about moving on the learning objects, American history, math, biology. Would you be able to share that link with the participants?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'll put them in. I'll put them in separately because I linked them out because they're separate learning objects. But let me go grab them and I'll put them in the chat. Okay,
great. What other questions does the group have? You can use the chat or the formal Q&A, whichever you're more comfortable. You're certainly welcome to unmute with *6, to ask a question verbally too. Don't be shy. Okay. As we're waiting, okay, looks like we got a question that came in. I can't quite see it. Hang on. So people often ask how we assess communication, collaboration, et cetera, in a 21st century learning environment. So Don, how would you respond to that?
I'm sorry, Katie. She can't chew gum and talk at the same time. I'll put that last link there in just a few minutes. So when you're talking about assessing communication, collaboration in a 21st learning environment, well, I think it's very important that expectations are established. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at some of the previous presentations over the last few weeks, but there's been one on rubrics, and I think it's important that you establish or you create for your students. Here are the expectations for level of communication. So if you have, for instance, if the communication, the expectation is that you, if your teacher responds in a group text, that you provide X number of responses, whatever the case may be, you establish here's what a level 4 might be, or here's what depending on how you rate that or scale that. A level 4 may be that you respond with respond promptly to my specific text in X amount of time, and you provide maybe a way that you push and challenge your students. And then so you show what that specific level of expectation is for that communication. Same thing for collaboration. If you're having kids, or if you're having students, if you're having them collaborate in a cohort amongst themselves, whether it be through Twitter, whether it be through some other kind of some kind of other, we call them personal learning networks or what have you, is you set that expectation for what that collaboration may be, so that when you're assessing that, you have, here's what an A would look like, here's what a B would look like, a D or whatever, or here's what a 4 looks like, a 3 looks like, a 2 looks like. So you be very upfront in what that communication is. I think even having a way for students to participate in the communication of that, what do they believe ought to constitute a certain level of achievement on ways that they can communicate and collaborate more effectively. There are great 21st century tools out there in terms of not necessarily how to assess it, but to create means by which they are inputting, whether it be using VoiceThread or Vokies or Google Hangout or Google Community. whatever that may be. A lot of great things out there, I think, that are viable for students to be able to show what they're learning through those two pieces. So I hope that helps. I hope that answered your question. All right, let me go get the biology example before I forget. Kay, you still there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just sorry.
I'm trying to just scan all sources here. And you answered the question well. She's going to go back and look at the rubric, so thanks for reminding her of that. And she likes the kids creating also, so good. I'm looking through the other sources to see if questions have come in from any other sources. Not seeing any additional at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and do my couple closing slides, but again, like I say every week, this doesn't mean that the end of questions is over. So certainly we'll keep watching for more questions as they come in, but want to be respectful of time. So I wanted to thank everyone for participating in today's K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series session. We are actually finalizing our sessions for the spring, so let us know if you have an interest in presenting or have topics you'd like to see covered. You can always reach me on Twitter at @1KatieGallagher or by email, katie.gallagher@blackboard.com. So you will be receiving this recording and slides via PDF in a few days and an invitation to participate in an online PLC. So accept it, join, and continue participating in this community. Just a reminder that our last session before the holiday break will be on Monday at 3:30 Eastern Time next week with another session on rubrics, Rubrics Really Relate by Larry Fallon from Arlington Public Schools. So want to thank Dawn for a great session today. And again, we'll stick on for another minute or so to see if any additional questions come in. But thanks everyone for your participation today, and thank you so much, Dawn.
Absolutely. And Kay, can I put in a shameless plug?
Absolutely.
Well, February 2nd is I have the privilege again of hosting another one of these innovative teaching series, and it's on developing your professional learning network. So I hope those that are still in the room can attend that. That's another thing that I'm very passionate about, so I hope you guys can join us.
That will be
shameless,
great.
I know.
No, thank you for bringing that up. I usually just mention the next week, but that's very relevant. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and we're excited to have you on again in the spring. Thank you for a great session today, and thanks everyone for participating.
Thanks, everybody.